The rain in Tacoma never really stops, it just changes moods. That night it was steady, soft, the kind that sounds like 100 quiet thoughts tapping against the windows. I had just finished washing the dinner dishes when my phone buzzed on the counter. A voicemail, odd, since nobody leaves those anymore. When I pressed play, I heard my daughter's voice. "Grace." She was whispering, but the tone made my stomach drop. "Okay, so Tuesday morning we'll take Mom for her memory test. Derek already called the notary. She just needs to sign, and it'll all be done." I froze. For a second I thought I misheard. Maybe she meant someone else's mom, but then I caught my own name, Evelyn. Clear as day, hidden under the rain. I replayed it twice, my thumb trembling. The word sign felt heavy, final. My husband used to say, "Never sign what you don't understand, Evie." He'd been gone 8 years now, but I could almost hear him beside me, that quiet warning in his voice. Grace had always been the responsible one, the planner. She handled the family group chat, the holidays, the smiles. Derek, her husband, was charming in public, short-tempered in private. They lived close enough to check on me, far enough to avoid chores. I sat down at the kitchen table, the light humming above me, the rain louder now. My eyes landed on my cobalt raincoat hanging by the door, drops still glistening on the sleeves from my walk earlier. I'd always loved that color, strong, certain, impossible to mistake for gray. Next to it, my old green spiral notebook. I'd used it for grocery lists once. I opened it without knowing why and wrote, "Tuesday memory test? Notary? Who called?" The pen scratched across the paper like it knew more than I did. I thought about calling Grace, demanding an explanation. But something told me not to. If they were planning something, confronting them now would only warn them. I needed to think, to stay calm. So I brewed tea, let it cool untouched, and listened again. The voicemail ended with Grace laughing softly, saying, "She won't even notice." Maybe that was true once. Maybe I was the kind of mother who forgave too easily, who believed love would fix everything. But not tonight. That night, the rain was my witness. I decided I had 4 nights to find out what was really waiting for me on Tuesday, and to make sure that if it was a trap, I'd be the one holding the proof. I spent the next morning pretending everything was normal. It's funny how quickly you can slip into performance when the audience is your own family. I made coffee, watered the plants, even sent Grace a "good morning" text like nothing had happened. She replied with a heart emoji and a picture of her cat. For a moment, I wanted to believe her smile again, the one that always said, "I've got this, Mom." But under it, there was something rehearsed. I'd seen it before. When she was a teenager lying about skipping school, the tiny flicker in her left eye before she smiled. You know, for most of my life, I thought love meant making things easier for everyone else. I used to cover extra shifts, cook extra meals, lend extra money. It was my language of care, "I'll handle it." Maybe that's why I never noticed when that phrase turned into permission for people to walk right over me. Grace used to call me her safe place. Derek, on the other hand, called me Mom, like it was a title he'd earned. He'd come around last summer to fix the leaking roof. I remember thanking him, feeling lucky to have a son-in-law who cared. Later, I found out he'd kept a spare key, in case of emergency. At the time, it sounded thoughtful. Now, it just sounds calculated. Lately, they've both been talking about simplifying my finances. Grace says, "You don't need to worry about online banking, Mom. It's too confusing." Derek nods, pretending to agree. And I'd laugh, saying, "You're probably right," even though I'd balanced a household budget on paper since the 80 seconds. That night, I sat down with my green spiral notebook again. The first page from the night before stared back at me, lonely. I wrote a new header in block letters, LOG. Beneath it, 5 columns: date, time, who, what, proof. Something in me needed order. Maybe it was the bus driver in me timing, routes, checklists. The first entry, Monday, 9:12 a.m. Grace texted about doctor appointment, said memory test, asked if I'd had breakfast. It sounds harmless, right? But once you start writing things down, the patterns begin to show. Every helpful visit, every gentle correction, every time she said, "Mom, you forgot." It's like stitching a quilt. The pieces only make sense when you step back and see the design. Part of me still wanted to be wrong. I even told myself, maybe they're just trying to help. But when someone's help always comes with less of your freedom, it stops being help. I flipped the page, ready to start another entry, but my hand shook. I realized something. I wasn't scared of losing the house. I was scared of losing my place in their hearts, and maybe, deep down, I already had. I closed the notebook, slid it under the phone charger, and took a long breath. The sound of rain had quieted, but the air still smelled like something was coming. If they truly believed I was forgetting things, maybe I'd let them think so for a while. Because this time, I'd remember everything. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The air felt heavy, like the sky was holding its breath. I made oatmeal, poured it into the same chipped bowl I'd used since Grace was a child, and stared at the spoon until it went cold. Something in me said today's the day to check. I put on my cobalt raincoat, the one that always made me feel sharper than I probably was, and walked to the credit union 2 blocks over. Diego, the branch manager, had known me for years. He used to ride my school bus back when he was 10. When he saw me, he smiled. "Miss Hart, haven't seen you in a while." I told him I just wanted to make sure my accounts were in order. He logged in, cheerful as always, then his smile softened. "Did you fax us a beneficiary change last week?" I blinked. "No, I haven't faxed anything since. 1,999. He turned the screen toward me. There it was, a scanned form titled Change of Beneficiary. The signature at the bottom had my name, but the E in Evelyn leaned forward like it was running late. My E never leaned. My stomach dropped. I heard the rain tapping against the window again, faint but persistent, like it was trying to get my attention. Diego frowned. "We flagged it because the IP address came from an auto shop Wi-Fi, not your home network. I can freeze outgoing wires and set fraud alerts if you want." I nodded, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "Do it." Henguatent. He printed copies, dates, IP logs, and the fax timestamp. As the printer hummed, I remembered all the times I'd handed Grace my bills, saying, "Just help me set up autopay." I'd handed her trust, disguised as paperwork. I thought of how Derek always offered to drop by my credit union, saying, "You shouldn't have to stand in line, Mom." That line used to make me smile. Now it made my chest tighten. Diego leaned forward. "Miss Hart, if anything feels off, call me directly. Don't use numbers they give you. Use this one." He scribbled it on a card and slid it across the desk. I folded the papers, tucked them inside the green spiral notebook, and whispered, mostly to myself, "Thank you." This is no tensure. As I walked home, the rain had turned steady again. My reflection in the shop windows looked calm, almost composed, but inside I was running through every conversation from the past month. Every "don't worry about it," every "Mom, I'll handle that." When I reached my front porch, I paused, unlocking the door with deliberate slowness. The house smelled like cedar and coffee. Ordinary, safe, until you realize safety can be staged. I set my notebook on the table, opened to a clean page, and wrote, "Tuesday possible forged form. Credit union, IP, auto shop." Diego alerted, freeze initiated. Then, in smaller letters underneath, "Their story starts to lean when their signature does." Header. I looked at the cobalt coat draped on the chair and thought, maybe armor doesn't have to be metal. Sometimes, it's paper and ink. By Sunday, the air in the house felt different, like someone had rearranged the oxygen when I wasn't looking. Grace called early that morning. "Mom, we're coming over for dinner tonight. Derek wants your lasagna. You know how he loves it." Her voice was light, almost cheerful. Too light. The kind of tone people use when they're walking on ice and pretending they can't hear the cracking. I told her I'd cook, just like old times. Then I wrote it down in my green spiral notebook. Sunday dinner, unplanned visit. Observe tone. Keep calm. The rest of the day, I worked slowly, grounding myself in small rituals. The smell of tomato sauce simmering, the rhythm of chopping herbs, the sound of rain rolling off the gutters. For a few hours, I let myself pretend this was still the home where love didn't require defense. When they arrived, Grace came in first, holding a bottle of wine she probably thought would smooth everything over. Derek followed, grinning like he owned the place. "You really shouldn't be cooking so much, Mom," he said, putting an arm around my shoulders. His hand lingered a little too long, patronizing, not affectionate. Grace looked around the kitchen as if taking inventory. "You've still got all these papers everywhere," she said, gesturing toward my notebook and the bank envelopes on the table. "Mom, you really need to let me organize this stuff. You're going to lose something important one day." I smiled politely. "I already have it all organized, sweetheart. Every paper has its place." For the first time, she looked at me with hesitation, like she wasn't sure if I meant the words or something beneath them. During dinner, Derek brought up my doctor. "We were thinking," he said between bites, "you should get that mental clarity test Dr. Landers mentioned. It's good to rule things out early, before they get serious." Anna Nix did. I took a sip of water to steady myself. "Funny," I said softly. "I already went to the bank this week to make sure everything was up to date. They mentioned some interesting documents." Grace's fork froze mid-air. "What kind of documents?" "Oh, just the kind people file when they want to make sure their signatures look better than mine." The silence that followed was almost beautiful in its awkwardness. Derek cleared his throat, forcing a laugh. Paperwork always gets mixed up. Clerks these days, huh?" I leaned back, folding my napkin neatly. "Sure, clerks." Inside, my pulse was steady, not from calmness, but from control. I wanted them to feel the edges of what I knew without giving them the full shape. A part of me felt cruel for it, but another part, the one that had stayed quiet too long, finally felt awake. After dessert, Grace stood up, her voice sugar-coated but shaking. "Mom, maybe you should rest. You look tired." I nodded. "Maybe I'll rest after Tuesday." Her face went pale. Derek shot her a look, subtle but sharp. When they left, I closed the door gently and pressed my palm against the wood, feeling my heartbeat steady beneath it. The kitchen still smelled like lasagna and tension. On the table, next to the half-empty wine bottle, the green spiral notebook waited patiently. I opened it to a fresh page and wrote, "They flinched. That means it's real." Then I added one more line, slower, deliberate. "Tuesday's coming, and so am I." Tuesday came wrapped in that pale, heavy kind of sunlight that makes you feel like time has slowed down just to watch what happens next. I'd slept barely 3 hours, my mind looping through every possibility, every lie that could be waiting for me. Grace arrived right on time, like she always did when something mattered to her. She wore that soft gray coat she saves for serious days, the kind people wear to court or funerals. Derek trailed behind her, phone in hand, tapping at it like he was logging evidence. "Ready, Mom?" she asked, all brightness and efficiency. "Dr. Landers just wants to check your reflexes and memory. Nothing to worry about." I smiled gently. "Of course, dear. I trust you completely." And for a split second, I saw relief in her eyes, the same flicker you see when a child thinks they've gotten away with something. In the car, I kept my green spiral notebook tucked in my bag, open to the page I'd titled, "The Appointment." Underneath, I'd written 3 words in bold ink: calm, collect, confirm. It was the rule I'd made for myself that morning. Don't confront, don't react, just observe. Let them reveal what they came to prove. The clinic smelled faintly of disinfectant and lavender air freshener, like someone trying too hard to make you comfortable. Dr. Landers, a man with soft eyes and a clipboard, smiled at me. "Mrs. Hart, it's wonderful to see you again. Grace tells me you've been having some trouble with memory." I met his eyes. "I'm curious, doctor. What exactly did my daughter tell you?" He hesitated. Grace jumped in. "Oh, it's nothing dramatic. Mom's just been a little forgetful lately, and I thought it'd be good to check for peace of mind." "Peace of mind," I repeated softly, tasting the phrase. I nodded and went along with the routine questions about dates, drawings of clocks, simple math. When he asked me to remember 3 words, apple, penny, church, I repeated them clearly, writing them down discreetly in my notebook later. Dr. Landers smiled politely, jotting notes, but I caught the way his pen paused whenever Grace spoke. He wasn't neutral, he was cautious. After the test, he said, "Everything looks fine for your age, Mrs. Hart. Sharp as ever." Grace's smile faltered. Derek frowned. "Are you sure?" She forgets a lot at home," he added quickly. The doctor adjusted his glasses. "I can only report what I observe, and today I observed clarity." Grace laughed awkwardly. "Well, maybe she's just having a good day." On the way home, the silence was thick enough to touch. Rain began to fall light at first, then heavier, streaking across the windshield in frantic lines. Grace turned the radio up, a nervous little hum filling the car. I looked out the window and whispered to myself, "Apple, Penny, church." Perfect recall. At the next red light, I turned slightly toward her. "You were right to bring me, sweetheart. It's good to know I'm fine." Grace's grip on the steering wheel tightened just enough to make the leather creak. When we pulled into my driveway, I thanked her, kissed her cheek, and watched them drive away. The taillights disappeared down the wet road, and I stood there for a moment, feeling the rain soak through my cobalt coat, wondering how many other mothers had been walked into traps disguised as doctor's visits. Inside, I placed the notebook on my desk and wrote, "Memory test passed. They're running out of stories. Next step, find their paper trail before they rewrite mine." Then, in small letters at the bottom of the page, I added something new, almost a whisper to myself. "I'm not the one who's confused." That Thursday night, the house felt strange, too quiet, like it was listening. I'd spent the day sorting through bills and old letters, trying to pretend life was still simple, but the stillness had a pulse, and I could feel it in my chest. Around 10:15, I was in the living room reading when I heard the back door creak. It was soft, careful, like whoever opened it didn't want to be heard. My hands went cold. I reached for my phone, but then I froze. The sound stopped. Maybe it was the wind, I told myself, or maybe it wasn't. I turned off the lamp, letting the room fall into shadow. The only light came from the kitchen window, a faint reflection of rain sliding down the glass. Then I heard it again. A low thud, metal scraping against wood, the filing cabinet. That was when my body moved before my fear could stop it. Barefoot, I stepped into the hallway. The air smelled faintly of wet leather and cheap cologne, Derek's cologne. My heart pounded so hard it almost drowned out the sound of papers rustling. He was in my office. From the doorway, I saw the outline of his shoulders, broad and tense, bent over my desk drawer. He was whispering into his phone, his voice sharp but quiet. "Yeah, it's here," Grace said, bottom drawer. "The deed and insurance file. No, she won't know I've got her spare key." My throat went dry. I took one slow step back, careful not to make the floorboard creak. Then I remembered the tiny brass bell I'd tied to that drawer handle 2 days ago, my signal. When it chimed, I'd know someone had been there. Now, hearing it faintly jingle in the dark, I knew I hadn't been paranoid. I'd been right. I moved quietly to the kitchen, my hands shaking but steady enough to press record on my phone. His voice carried down the hall again. "Once I scan this, we can start the transfer. Carol said she'd push it through Monday." Every word was a nail in their own coffin. I pressed the phone closer to the doorframe, my pulse loud in my ears. Then, just as suddenly as he came, he left papers folded under his arm, footsteps fading into the rain. I stood there for a long minute after the door shut, the sound of the storm returning to fill the silence. My knees went weak. I wanted to scream, or cry, or both, but instead, I reached for my green spiral notebook and wrote with trembling hands, "Thursday, 10:17 p. M. Derek entered house using spare key. Access drawer. Recorded voice. Evidence. Phone audio, plus bell marker." Then underneath, I wrote one more line. "If they treat love like paperwork, I'll treat paperwork like justice." I locked every door, every window, and tucked the notebook into my pillowcase like it was a heartbeat I couldn't afford to lose. Lying in bed, I kept hearing the bell's faint jingle replay in my mind. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a boundary, a promise to myself. That night, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone waking up after a very long sleep. The morning after the break-in, I woke up to sunlight cutting through the curtains like an accusation. Everything looked too normal, coffee mug on the counter, slippers by the bed, the world pretending nothing had happened. But inside, I felt hollow. For weeks I'd been gathering proof, connecting dots, writing it all down in that green spiral notebook like it was my shield. But now, staring at the pages, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years: exhaustion. The kind that sinks into your bones. I sat at the kitchen table and whispered, "What if I'm the problem?" That's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. You start turning it inward. You wonder if you were too soft, too blind, too eager to believe that love would protect you from everything else. I thought about all the times I'd said yes when I meant no. All the times I'd handed Grace control because I thought that's what good mothers do. The phone buzzed a text from Grace. "Mom? Derek said you seemed confused last night. Please don't stress yourself. We'll come by later to check on you." Confused. That word sliced right through me. It was the same word they'd used with Dr. Landers, the same whisper they'd been planting in the shadows. I felt my hands tremble, not from fear this time, but from something sharper clarity. I realized they weren't just trying to take my house. They were trying to take my voice, to rewrite me as someone unreliable, so when I finally screamed the truth, no one would listen. For a few minutes, I let the tears fall, grief, anger, disbelief all tangled together. But beneath it, something steady began to rise. A quiet conviction. My mother used to tell me, "Don't mistake kindness for surrender, Evelyn. Even flowers grow through concrete." I reached for the notebook again. On a clean page, I wrote 3 questions, one under the other. What am I afraid to admit? What am I willing to lose to keep my dignity? What would my younger self want me to do now? My answers came slowly, shakily at first, but they came. I'm afraid of being alone. I'm willing to lose their approval before I lose myself. She'd want me to stand up and stop apologizing for existing. That's when I knew this wasn't about revenge, it was about repair. Repairing the part of me that believed love was supposed to hurt if it was real. I put on my cobalt coat, my armor, and looked at my reflection in the hall mirror. The woman staring back wasn't fragile. She looked tired, yes, but also steady, rooted, awake. "I'm not confused," I said out loud, just to hear how it sounded. "I'm documenting." The words hung in the air like a vow. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in months, Maya, an old friend who now worked as a paralegal downtown. She'd once told me, "When they start making you question your memory, start collecting their mistakes." "Maya," I said when she picked up, my voice steady for the first time in days. "I think I finally understand what you meant. I have recordings, documents, timestamps, everything, and I'm done being afraid." She didn't ask for proof. She just said, "Good. Bring the notebook." I hung up, closed my eyes, and exhaled. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to their story. I was writing my own. The next afternoon, I met Maya downtown at a coffee shop on Maple and Fifth, a small corner place filled with the smell of roasted beans and rain-soaked coats. The kind of place where everyone looked busy, but no one was really watching. Perfect for what I needed. When she saw me, she smiled in that way people do when they recognize strength before you do. "Evelyn Hart," she said, setting her briefcase beside her chair. Still writing everything down, I hope. I placed the green spiral notebook on the table between us, like it was sacred text. "Every date, every message, every visit," I said, "and an audio recording from Thursday night. In nothing then statter, and related in very speakin', and then rafter now the red." Maya flipped through the pages carefully, her eyes sharp and deliberate. "You've got a better paper trail than most junior attorneys I work with. This isn't just paranoia, this is documentation. That's power." I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that until the words landed. Power. I'd been surviving on fear so long that the idea of control felt almost foreign. I told her everything. The forged signature, the visit to Dr. Landers, Derek's break-in, the bell, the voice recording. She didn't interrupt once, just nodded and wrote notes of her own. When I finally stopped, she said softly, "They're not just manipulating you emotionally, Evelyn. They're building a narrative, a false one. But the good news? You've got the receipts to burn it down." She slid a small folder across the table. Inside was a list titled Incident Log Essentials. 10 points, simple and clear. Timestamps, names, quotes, witnesses, and follow-up actions. "Start an official folder," Maya said. "Keep your original notebook for memory, but this one make it for defense. Call the police to log a non-emergency report about the break-in. File it under your own name before they can file something under theirs. Calm, collect, confirm. No panic, no performance, just process." The words felt like oxygen. Calm, collect, confirm, I repeated, writing them at the top of a new page. She leaned back, stirring her coffee. "And Evelyn, get your locks changed. Today. Don't announce it. Just do it." Something about that sentence, the quiet authority in it, snapped the last thread of hesitation in me. For months, I'd been reacting. Now, for the first time, I was acting. After we finished, I walked home through the drizzle, the city glowing with puddles and traffic lights. The world looked sharper, cleaner, as if someone had adjusted its focus. At the locksmith's, the man recognized my nervous smile. "Rough week?" he asked gently. "Something like that," I said. "Just need to make sure the right people have the right keys." He laughed, not realizing the weight of my words. Within an hour, every lock in the house was replaced. I stood on my porch, holding the old brass keys in my palm, heavy with history. I thought about melting them down, turning them into something else, a pendant maybe. Something that meant protection, not permission. That night, when I wrote my log entry, it wasn't shaky or rushed. It was clean, factual, certain. Friday, 6:42 p.m. Locks changed, notebook secured, voice recording backed up, contacted Maya, calm, collect, confirm. Then, almost as an afterthought, I added a single sentence. They built their plan on my silence. They didn't expect my pen. The house was quiet again, but this time, it didn't feel like fear. It felt like a pause before justice. By Sunday evening, the air around my house felt heavy again, but not with fear this time. It was anticipation, the kind that hums before a storm. Grace texted me earlier that day. "We're coming by tonight. We need to talk about next steps." Next steps. The phrase made my stomach twist. They thought I was still in the same story they were writing. They had no idea I'd already started a new one. I spent the afternoon preparing, not with weapons or rage, but with order. Copies of every forged document, printouts from the credit union, a transcript of Derek's voice from my recording, all neatly arranged in a manila folder. On top of the stack, my green spiral notebook, open to the page titled Timeline of Truth. When the doorbell rang, I didn't flinch. I straightened my cobalt coat, steadied my breath, and opened the door. Grace was first to speak. "Mom, we're worried about you," she said softly. Derek stood beside her, arms crossed, scanning the room like he owned it. "You've been doing strange things lately, changing locks, talking to lawyers." "Yes," I interrupted gently, "and I'm glad you noticed." They blinked. For the first time, I didn't sound defensive. I sounded prepared. "Why don't we sit?" I said, motioning to the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once taught Grace her multiplication tables, where I'd signed her permission slips, where she'd now tried to sign away my life. Derek leaned forward. "We just want what's best for you, Evelyn. The memory tests, the finances, it's all for your protection." I met his gaze. "I recorded you breaking into my home, Derek. I heard you say, 'She won't know I've got her spare key.' Would you like to hear it?" He froze, his jaw tightening. Grace's face drained of color. "Mom, what?" "No, you misunderstood." "I didn't misunderstand," I said quietly. I verified. At the bank, at the doctor's, with a lawyer. Axerf. From the hallway, a knock interrupted us. I'd timed it perfectly. Maya stepped in, wearing her gray blazer and that calm expression that says she's not here for small talk. "Good evening," she said. "I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Hart." Grace stood abruptly. "This is insane. You can't just bring lawyers into family conversations." Maya opened her briefcase, laying down documents like cards in a winning hand. "Actually, Grace, you can when the conversation involves fraud, coercion, and falsified signatures. You and your husband have been very thorough in your efforts. Unfortunately, so has your mother." The room went silent except for the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. Derek tried to laugh. "You can't prove anything." Maya smiled thinly. "You're welcome to test that theory, But the police already have the audio, the IP logs, and your cousin Carol's written statement from the clerk's office. So if this is a bluff, it's a very detailed one. Grace sank into her chair, her voice trembling. Mom, why are you doing this? I really looked at her for the first time in months. Because you made me doubt myself. You called me confused, fragile, forgetful. You made me feel small in my own home. But I remember everything. I remember every bill I paid, every loan I took for you, every sacrifice you forgot. And I won't let you erase me from my own story. He said it Tannels. Her lip quivered. Derek's face hardened into that cold mask I'd seen too many times. But I didn't look away. Maya closed her folder. We'll be in touch regarding the formal settlement offer. If you'd prefer to resolve this quietly, now's the time to cooperate. When they finally left, the silence they left behind was sharp but clean, like the air after a thunderstorm. I stood at the doorway, watching the taillights fade, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Stillness that wasn't born of fear, but peace. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the notebook again. The last entry filled the page. Sunday, 9:47 p.m. They came to finish their story. I finished mine instead. Underneath, I wrote a single line that felt like truth, not anger. The boundary isn't what I say to them, it's what I promise myself. The following week unfolded like an echo. Every sound felt distant, like it had already happened and I was just catching up to the meaning. The police took my statement on Monday morning, polite but careful. They'd already spoken to Derek, who denied everything. Grace had texted me once. I didn't know what he was planning, Mom. Please believe me. For days, I didn't answer. I didn't know what was true anymore, or maybe I did, but I needed silence to hear it clearly. Then, on Thursday, Maya called. There's something you need to see, she said. Meet me at the clerk's office. When I arrived, she slid a copy of a file across the counter. Quitclaim deed transfer of title, my name, my house, and a third signature I didn't expect, Grace Ann Lewis. I felt my throat tighten. So it wasn't just Derek? Maya shook her head gently. The forgery came from his side, but the submission this filing was sent from Grace's email, probably under pressure. But there's one more detail you should see. She pointed to the date of filing, the day before the memory test. They hadn't even waited to hear the results. They'd planned to take everything before I could prove I was still sound. That was the first twist, the confirmation of betrayal. The second came a moment later, when Maya flipped another page to reveal a notarized statement, unsigned, undated, written in Grace's handwriting. It read, I can't do this anymore. He said it's for Mom's own good, but it doesn't feel right. If she ever finds out, I'll lose her for good. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words blurred together, but the weight of them sank deep. Grace had known. She had helped him, but somewhere inside that tangled mess of greed and fear, she still felt guilt. I walked home through a light drizzle, the city shimmering like glass. The cobalt coat clung to my shoulders, heavier than usual, but warm. When I got home, I brewed tea and sat in silence. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. Like the truth had finally burned through the fog. Justice wasn't loud or cinematic, it was paperwork signed in ink, boundaries written into law, locks that clicked shut with certainty. Later that evening, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Grace stood there, eyes red, hands shaking. Mom, I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought if I went along with him, I could protect you. I didn't know it would go this far. I looked at her for a long moment. There was a time I would have hugged her immediately, rushed to fix it. But boundaries are love. In their truest form, they protect what's worth keeping. Grace, I said softly, I don't know how to trust you right now, but I'm willing to let the truth decide for both of us. She nodded, tears spilling over. I understand. When she left, I didn't feel broken. I felt balanced. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about clarity, about putting things back in their rightful place. That night, I opened my green spiral notebook for the last time. The pages were thick with evidence, with pain, with proof. On the final page, I wrote, Friday, 8:03 p.m. Grace confessed. Derek charged. Property restored. Locks changed. Notebook archived. Act, said read it. Then below it, one last sentence. My closing line. Hot anger signs, cold anger files. Love doesn't mean letting them rewrite you. I closed the notebook and set it beside my teacup. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the world quiet and washed clean. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive like thunder, it slips in quietly, like the last note of a song you didn't know was ending. It's been 3 weeks since the confrontation, and the house feels different. Lighter. The air moves easier through the rooms now, as if it's finally mine again. The locks gleam new against the doors, every click a reminder that I get to decide who comes in. The police finished their investigation. Derek took a plea deal: fraud, attempted coercion, falsification of documents. Grace wasn't charged. Maya said her cooperation and that half-written confession made all the difference. I agreed not to contest it. Some things are better settled in truth than in court. Grace sends me short messages, now polite, cautious, like someone learning to speak again after a long silence. How are you feeling? Did you eat? Would it be okay if I stopped by next month? And for the first time in a long while, I don't reply out of guilt. I reply out of choice. I'm doing well, Grace. I'm taking care of myself. I've been spending my mornings at the library downtown, helping seniors set up online accounts safely. Maya helped me organize a little community clarity workshop. Just 3 tables, a whiteboard, and coffee that's always too strong. We call it the boundary table. People come in with stories that sound too familiar. Sons, daughters, nieces, neighbors. They ask, "How did you know when it was time to draw the line?" And I tell them the truth. You don't know at first. You just feel it somewhere between exhaustion and awakening. The moment you start documenting instead of doubting, that's the moment you start healing. Thank you for watching. The green spiral notebook now sits on my bookshelf, right beside my late husband's Navy photo and the ceramic mug Grace made in 4th grade. I don't open it often, but sometimes I trace the cover with my fingers, the faint indents of every entry beneath it. It isn't a story of betrayal anymore, it's a record of repair. Last week, I found the old brass keys in my drawer, the ones Derek had copied. I thought about throwing them out, but instead, I took them to a local craftsman. He melted them down and shaped them into a small pendant, a keyhole, delicate but solid. I wear it now, just above my heart. A reminder that protection isn't about shutting people out. It's about knowing when to keep yourself safe. I still have moments when doubt tries to visit, when I wonder if I was too harsh, or if Grace will ever truly forgive herself. But then I hear Maya's voice in my head. Boundaries aren't revenge, Evelyn. They're repairs. So, I repair. Slowly, gently, in my own time. I've even started planting again. Tomatoes, basil, a few wildflowers near the fence. The soil is still damp from last night's rain. When I press my fingers into it, I feel grounded, steady, alive. As I write this, the evening light is spilling through the window, turning everything gold. I close my eyes and think of that first night, the voicemail, the fear, the disbelief, and I whisper to myself, "You made it through," because I did. And maybe that's what survival really is. Not the absence of pain, but the quiet decision to live with both memory and mercy. At the end of my new notebook, the clean one I started after everything, I've written a new promise to myself. The boundary isn't a wall. It's a door that only opens from the inside. It's been 6 months now, and sometimes I forget how heavy the air used to feel in this house. How I used to tiptoe around my own rooms, afraid of phone calls, of mail, of the word trust. This was not Sander 9. But lately, I've been waking up before the alarm, just to watch the sunrise from the kitchen window. The light moves across the floorboards, slow and certain, and for once, it doesn't feel like time is chasing me. It feels like it's keeping me company. I still wear the keyhole pendant every day. It's small, barely noticeable to anyone else, but I can feel its weight when I breathe. It reminds me of what I learned the hard way. That safety isn't silence, and love without honesty isn't love at all. Grace visits on Sundays now, always with a knock, never a key. She brings pastries from that bakery I love, the one with the flaky croissants and burnt coffee. We sit on the porch, 2 women learning how to talk again. Not mother and daughter locked in guilt, but 2 adults, rebuilding something fragile and real. She doesn't say much about what happened. Neither do I. Some wounds don't need rehearsing, they just need time. But sometimes, between the small talk, she'll say something like, "I didn't know you were so strong, Mom." And I'll smile, half teasing, half truth. Neither did I. There's no dramatic ending, no final confrontation, no miracle reunion, just peace that grows like moss, quiet, steady, persistent. I've also started volunteering once a week at the local legal aid center. Mostly, I listen. Sometimes I help seniors organize their papers, label files, or record their stories. There's a power in seeing someone realize that they're allowed to protect themselves. One woman, Clara, came in last week, crying because her son had taken her car title without permission. She kept saying, "I don't want to ruin the relationship." I told her the same thing Maya once told me. You're not ruining it, you're rescuing it. You're rescuing the truth of who you are inside it. She smiled through tears, and I saw it, the spark, that moment she chose herself again. It's quiet, but when you've lived through what I have, you can recognize the sound of freedom. It's not applause, it's paper being filed in your own name. I keep my green spiral notebook on a high shelf now, not because I've stopped needing it, but because it's complete. Every page tells the story of a woman who stopped mistaking kindness for weakness, love for obedience, or fear for loyalty. Sometimes I think about my husband the way he used to joke that I'd outlive all my worries. He was right. I did, but not by avoiding them, by naming them, documenting them, facing them head on. People assume survival looks like strength, but I've learned it's really about structure systems, small steps, and boundaries that hold you up when everything else falls apart. That's why, at the end of every community workshop, I give out one page titled The Boundary Card. It has 3 short affirmations: calm, collect, confirm. Paper over panic. No is a complete sentence. Every time someone folds that paper into their wallet, I feel something shift, like the world is quietly, collectively remembering its worth. I end each session the same way I end this story. Justice isn't revenge, it's restoration. Boundaries aren't walls, they're repairs. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. The porch light flickers as evening settles. The world hums soft and steady. I close my new notebook, smile to myself, and whisper one last thought that I know is true now. Love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means standing. Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is stop proving you're the good one. Because boundaries aren't cruelty, they're clarity. They don't end relationships. They reveal which ones were built on respect. Evelyn's story reminds us that justice isn't loud or vengeful. It's quiet, documented, and written in ink. A notebook, a timestamp, a single calm sentence. That's how she reclaimed her voice. You don't need to fight every lie. You just need to keep your receipts and tell the truth once, cleanly. If you've ever been made to doubt your own memory, start here. 1. Write down one boundary you've been afraid to say out loud. 2. Begin a small clarity log. Dates, details, what was said. You're not paranoid, you're preserving truth. 3. Practice the 3C rule. Calm, collect, confirm. This is not legal advice. 4. Change one lock, password, or pattern that no longer feels safe, even if it's just emotional space. 5. Tell one trusted friend, "I'm not confused. I'm documenting." Her green spiral notebook wasn't just paper, it was armor. And that keyhole pendant she wears now? A reminder that protection doesn't mean shutting people out, it means knowing when to keep yourself in. If this story resonated with you, share one boundary you're ready to keep in the comments, in your own notebook, or even just whispered to yourself. And if you want the free one-page boundary card checklist mentioned in this story, you can download it below. Because love without honesty isn't love. And safety, dear friend, is not selfish, it's sacred. Wishing you a calm night on the side of the boundary that finally feels like home.